There's even evidence.
There's even evidence. Okay, welcome everyone to our regular meeting of council for Monday, July 8th, 2019. We will call our meeting to order and recognize that we're holding our meeting on the unceded territories of the Hoopachesit and Sechot First Nations. Are there any late items to be from councillors? Seeing none. Any late items from the city clerk? Okay, lovely. And I'll just let everyone know that this right here is Councillor Solda. So she's not with us in person today, but is joining us by phone. So you'll hear her voting on each of our matters by voice today. Okay, would somebody like to move approval of our agenda?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. And we have minutes from the regular meeting of council held at 2 p.m. on June 24th, 2019. Would somebody like to move adoption?
So moved, Madam Mayor. No, sorry. I was speaking with our city clerk and those minutes. I actually opened the meeting for you, and I didn't know if it had to be reflected in those minutes or not. Okay. City clerk seemed to think that was kind of important, so. Seems important. Thanks.
That's great. So we will amend those. Lovely. So we have a motion to approve and a seconder as amended. Would somebody, I think, all in favor? Carried. Okay, and that brings us to public input period, which is an opportunity for members of the public to address council. And seeing no members of the public here today, I think we will just push past this. All right, so on to delegations. We are very excited today to have our new manager of recreation services here. So I'll call up Director Thorpe to introduce him.
Exactly. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very pleased to welcome Jeff Taves and introduce him to you, Mayor and Council. And Jeff comes to us by way of Calgary and Campbell River. And as our Manager of Recreation Services, his first two items on the agenda are to work on programs as well as all of our guest services related initiatives.
Lovely. Welcome. If you want to speak, you're welcome to.
No, just I'm very through the mayor. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward. This is an exciting community, and you've got a lot of drive, and everyone is very excited to see what's going to be happening moving forward, and so am I. I can't wait to get going. So. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, welcome to Port Alberni, and we are excited to have you, and always excited, although we had a wonderful person in the position previously, so we will miss her. But really looking forward to seeing what you bring and what your ideas are.
Great. Thank you very much.
Are there any comments from Council? Councillor Haggard.
You're going to be working with the great team, Jeff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, you know what? I already recognize that too. I've had some fantastic meetings. My onboarding and orientation has been excellent. And like I said, I'm chomping at the bit to really get going here. So.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have no unfinished business. So item F, staff reports. And the first one is accounts. Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that certification of the Director of Finance dated July 8, 2019 be received and checks numbered 144062 to 144140 inclusive and payments totaling $18,926,529.37 be approved.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
And all in favor? Carried. Councillor Solda?
Yes. Oh, approved.
Was that in favor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry.
It is awkward, isn't it? We
Well,
appreciate.
I'm watching it, and now the speaker, our Parks and Rec people have just left. It's a delay reaction here.
Yeah, there is a bit of a delay if you're watching it on the webinar. Okay, so moving on to item 2 from our Chief Administrative Officer, the Log Pond Dam Project. CAO.
Madam Mayor, Council will recall that Council budgeted in the 2019 annual financial plan. You budgeted, I believe, in the neighborhood of $200,000 for a project to remediate the dam at the McLean Mill, for the dam that holds back the log pond at McLean Mill. So we've done a lot of the work that was the engineering work. We were ready to pull the trigger on going to tenders, request for tenders for that project. And around the same time, we were also looking at septic issues on site and environmental issues. And council directed that we put the log pond dam project on hold, pending more information on both the septic and the environmental. Given that at your last meeting you took input from Dr. Hasselback on both of those issues, I wanted to bring this back to council's attention and see if you're ready to proceed with this project or not.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Will we be able to stay in that $200,000 budget to do what you'd like to do?
You know, that's the big question, right? So our budget was based on estimates that we received from an engineer. And you really don't know until you go to tender to see what the prices are going to come in at. So the budget was based on professional advice, but the test of that is what the market bids.
Okay, Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I get some clarification from the CAO on this project? Is this project simply so that people can drive across the dam, or is it in order to do work on the dam so there's no leakage of water into Cassuxis Creek? I've been a little bit confused on this issue.
Sure. It's a bit of both, and I apologize for not having, because we've got an arm's length engineer doing the work for us, we haven't had that person here reporting to you, so I've been representing that to you. And I'm not as smart as an engineer, so I just can't articulate those things. So my understanding is that there's two issues. One is there's essentially one or two log bridges inside the dam that vehicles drive over. And as those logs are deteriorating, their ability to carry those loads is diminished. And so certainly there's an aspect to it that this will enable continued driving back and forth of heavy vehicles because we need to move a heavy vehicle across there a couple times a year to support the hatchery, for example, and sometimes the logging show as well. So that's the one piece, the vehicle piece. The other piece is there's 2 or 3 breaches through the dam. The dam is actually a concrete dam inside that berm that you see, and it's that concrete dam that holds back the water. So the berm is essentially to look historic and enable the driving upon. There's a couple of breaches through that concrete wall that are rotting, the metal pipes, and they need to be replaced. So sleeved and capped or just filled. So it's two-pronged.
Can these two projects be separated, or is it all in one?
I think we could separate those two. We could
Okay.
break it out and say we want to do some of it and not all of it.
Because I would support keeping the dam safe so there's no leakage of water into Cassuxis Creek, but the other part I'm a little bit torn about. So if it could be separated, I would appreciate that.
Other questions from council? Yeah, so my thoughts are similar to Councillor Haggard's. I guess what I've been trying to understand with this project is it required, or are we doing it to as a nice to have project so that we don't inconvenience the couple of times a year trucks are being driven over it? And what I've been wanting to get a clearer answer on, and you might not have this today, but maybe you could bring it back for our next meeting, is there's been a lot of talk about the dam inspector and managing our dam properly. And if we don't do this project, is that not managing our dam properly? Or is there an alternative to this project? So, could we just say, unfortunately, our dam doesn't have a capacity that we can drive vehicles over it at this time and shut it down to vehicle traffic? I know that might not be ideal, but if this is, if we're going to spend, I think it's actually $265,000 is what we have in the budget for it. And I recognize that those funds are already budgeted, but if we're going to spend $265,000, is this our absolute greatest need? I think we put it on our list because we were under the impression that it was a project we were required to do. And I'm getting more the impression now that it's a project that we're required to do if we want to allow vehicle traffic to drive over the dam. So I think just a bit more clarification on that. What is required, and are there alternatives? It doesn't mean that we won't ever do the project if we hold it off now, but I think we need to know so that we can prioritize with other projects.
Okay, and the reason I said 200,000-ish, of that 65, that also paid for the stage 1 environmental assessment. So there were some things that are already committed out of that budget piece.
That was a separate budget.
I don't think that it was, but I've been mistaken before. Yeah.
It was.
Okay.
Well, we'll see who's correct on
It
that
doesn't
later.
matter really who's right or wrong, but just so we get the facts, right? But I believe that there were some other factors inside that budget.
Okay. Okay. So regardless, around $200,000. Councillor Poon, did you have a question?
Well, just a comment. I think it's important to note that there are other means of accessing the other side of the dam, and there's a back road which I've driven, and it's okay. I mean, it's passable.
And I think that's the important piece here. So I think that in my mind, it's clear that doing the work is ideal. Obviously, it's going to, extend the life of our dam and give the most convenience for people using that site. I think we just have to, anytime we're looking at spending $200,000, we have to decide if it's the greatest priority and the greatest need with all of the other infrastructure challenges we have. Were there any further comments from council? Councillor Paulson?
Well, yeah, I agree. First of all, the dam's got to be done. Like, we should be starting on that tomorrow. Yeah. But the bridging sections that you're talking about, these are obviously deteriorating and starting to fail, and we're going to have to do them either today or tomorrow. Yeah. And so we want to give that some thought. I'd just like to get it done, get it behind us. But that's just my thoughts.
Councillor Solda, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I agree with Councillor Haggard and yourself, Madam Mayor.
Okay. So I'm wondering if for today we should receive the report and then maybe the CAO could bring us back a bit more information for our next meeting. So what I've heard questions asked on are what it would look like to separate out the two parts of the project, and then some clarification on if not allowing vehicle traffic over it would be a sufficient dam management plan to the dam inspector or not. Are there any questions I'm missing from council here? Councillor Corbeil?
Just a question, is it possible to have the engineer come here and answer questions? Because I have a feeling if we start breaking this up, we're going to end up paying twice as much in the long run. There's probably some efficiencies to be had if everything's done at the same time. So I'd like to be able to ask the engineer those kinds of questions.
For sure. I think that's a great point. Okay. Okay. So would somebody like to move receipt of the report?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
Second? Okay. And seeing no more questions or comments, all in favor? Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Carried. Thank you. Okay, and moving on to item 3 from the Director of Engineering and Public Works, remedial action requirement and the demolition of 5109 Athol Street. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. So I have a report regarding the Arrowview apartment building on Athol Street. I kind of took this on after the bylaw manager left a month or so ago. So got this to tender as per council's direction quite a while ago now. So you'll see that we received 3 bids ranging from $435,000 to $663,000. So quite a range. Local contractor Bowerman Excavating is the low bidder. They have done some work on that building in the past. I think 2 years ago. They did some work for the owner and did some hazardous materials abatement in the upper 2 floors. So they're quite familiar with the building and also with what's left to be done and what's needed to take it down. There was a lot of sort of unknowns as to what would happen if the entire building, including the first floor and the first floor structure, foundation walls that are basically at this point sustaining the surrounding roads and sidewalks. So we chose to put this out with some certainty around the scope. Really felt that if we included everything from regrading the site and removing and buttressing and somehow keeping the roads in place, those unknowns would drive the cost quite a bit north of where these are already. So yeah, as I've said in there, we will work with the engineers to see exactly what's required once basically the top 3 floors are gone. There's been some work done in sort of the basement in terms of structurally making it safe for the hazardous materials removal and abatement, as well as the taking down the structure. So a lot of requirements from WorkSafe in terms of doing this safely and keeping everybody around it safe as well. I mean, there's people living in the house right next door, there's businesses, and again, the streets and sidewalks. So that is, yeah, the most current price. Obviously more than what we envisioned probably a year ago. And talking with the engineer that we're working with, 600 and maybe just a little more than that is probably what's going to be required to fully remediate that site.
Okay,
So looking for your direction.
thank you. Questions from council? Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, because we're going to award Bowerman 456, and then you're saying 600K. Is all that money available, or are we going to have to do something to make up the shortfall?
So it was always, I guess, talked about or envisioned that this would come out of the land sales reserve. Information from the Director of Finance is that there's currently, or at the end of 2018, about 850-ish thousand in land sales. So there is enough money there to undertake this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Paulson?
So beyond the demolition of the top 3 floors, just trying to get, and if we demolish right down to the foundation, is the thought to bring in fill to fill that hole and level it off and give some support for streets and sidewalks?
So the engineers will tell us, but
What needs to be
it
done?
may be lock blocks, it may be additional concrete buttresses poured up against there. Yeah, you may have to remove the sidewalk and work. We just don't have those details at this
Yeah.
point.
But I think the idea is to backfill once the whole thing is gone.
Yeah, absolutely. The
And
street,
level the property off
yeah,
a bit.
we'll have to at least structurally support,
Yeah.
yeah, particularly Second Avenue there.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Haggard?
My question was already asked and answered.
Great, thank you. Councillor Corbeil, anything down there?
Yeah, this might be a little out of scope, but I assume at the end of the day that the cost of taking this building down will go towards the owner's taxes.
Correct.
And in all likelihood, at some point, it'll come up for sale. Does the city have the ability to not put it up for sale? Or put up an upset price on these lands? I guess I'm asking through
Maybe
the
we
mayor
could
to
ask
see.
the Deputy Director of Finance to speak to the process for that, if she's prepared, and what would happen. Yeah.
So we will invoice the owner. They'll have about 30 days to pay the invoice. It will then go to taxes in arrears. If it stays on taxes in arrears and it's not paid within 3 years, then it will go up for tax sale. So at that point, when it enters tax sale, the upset price would be cost of demolition and any arrears taxes, interest, admin charges applied on the account at that time. So that'll go up for tax sale. If no one bids on that, then it would become city property.
So to clarify, we wouldn't, I've heard some concern that, the owner could buy it back for, say, $200,000 in a tax sale when we've spent $600,000 on it. That's not how the process would work. We would set the price at what was owing,
Absolutely. So anything incurred on the account, if they currently have taxes in arrears, the demolition cost itself, all those will be applied to the invoice, and the upset price would include all of it with interest.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good. Councillor Poon, did you have any questions? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Good. You're welcome.
So I think, I mean, we're looking for council direction on this. I'm happy to see that the low bidder is a local contractor. That's fantastic. And sorry, I will ask Councillor Solda in a moment for comment. My question is, how long are do we have to make a decision today? How long are the prices, the bids good for?
So the bid is irrevocable for 60 days from the date of closing, which was
Okay.
June the 28th.
Okay.
So I haven't worked that out, but
Okay.
around the end of August.
Okay. And I think the reason that I ask that is, I mean, nobody wants to pay this. I think at the end of the day, as much as we want to see this building come down, and we, recognize that it needs to come down, it is still a difficult, amount to put on city taxpayers, essentially, and likely a cost that will be borne by city taxpayers long term. And I'm kind of reminded back of the house on 2nd Avenue that we put for demolition, and somebody ended up, before we could demolish it, somebody ended up buying it and taking it down cheaper than we probably would have been able to. I don't think that's going to end up being the case here, but I'm interested what council's thoughts are on if we should move forward today, or if there is any last attempt to see if somebody else wants to take it down. And I'm going to go to Councillor Solda first, because she hasn't spoken. Councillor Solda, do you have any comments?
I would agree. If I don't want to put this on the taxpayers. It's a lot of money. That property is not particularly worth that kind of money. And if there's a chance that someone will, at the last minute, come and take it down, what's another month? What's the difference? People have waited this long. Can they wait another month?
Okay.
And if construction started right away, Madam Mayor, there's so much happening. Tourists are happening right now. We're going to take it down in the middle of in the summer when tourists are coming back and forth. Is it worthwhile to wait till after the season, or is it worthwhile to go now?
Okay.
That's how I'm looking at it.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Paulson and then Councillor Poon.
Well, I guess I'm just looking at historically, and we've been dealing with this for 5 years, and for me, I'm talked out about it. It's time to make a decision. I thought that we were going down the right path when we got to this point, and I'm ready to move forward with the contract, and I don't have much else to say. I mean, we've been stalled and put off, through this process, and it has to come down. It's a bad building, and it's a bad building that's waiting for something to happen, and I'm ready to move forward.
Councillor Poon?
I agree that the building should come down, but I note that the building is currently for sale. I think if a buyer were to come buy the place and want to demolish it, I think that would save us a bundle of money. I think perhaps this listing needs 2 more weeks of exposure.
Other comments? Yeah, so I think that's really, I have to say I'm not optimistic that someone is going to come forward and want to buy it. I guess I'm maybe looking for clarification on if we move forward today with awarding the contract to Bowerman, and somebody comes forward tomorrow, because we know that often these things get much more media attention after the bids have come in. If somebody comes forward tomorrow and wants to, or a week from now, and wants to buy it, have we lost that opportunity?
You've got 60 days.
But
Yeah.
if we award the contract, if we award the contract today, do we still have the opportunity to go back on that next week, or are we better to wait 2 weeks for our next council meeting if we want to give that last opportunity?
No, I think if we award the contract, we've awarded the contract.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
you do have, 2 weeks wouldn't hurt, and we do have till the end of August. Yeah, just a comment. I mean, I've been in the building once. I was in there with one of the fellows that did the work 2 years ago, and he said it's deteriorated a lot since that time. So, I mean, you're looking through the roof. It's in tough shape.
For sure. Okay. Councillor Washington?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to agree with Councillor Paulson. I think we've had enough 11th hours on this project, and like our engineer said, or our superintendent said, something's going to happen. A piece of that roof's going to fall off or something, and as much as I hate to see the historic value of it go up or down and crumbling, it just, I think it's time to move.
Okay. So we have no motion on the floor right now. We have a proposed motion in front of us.
Let's receive it first.
So would somebody like to move receipt of the report?
So moved.
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so on receipt of the report, all in favor? Councillor Solda?
In favor.
In favor. And would somebody like to make the next motion? Councillor Paulson?
I'd like to move that Council for the City of Port Alberni award contract ITT number BYL 19-01 demolition of 5109 Athol Street to Bowerman Excavating Limited for $435,225 plus GST for a total of $456,986.25 with funds provided from the Land Sale Reserve Fund.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, and further discussion on this? Okay, seeing that, oh, sorry, Councillor Corbeil.
Well, I didn't speak earlier, but I'm going to vote against this motion because I do feel, 2 more weeks. I hear the 11th hour thing. This will truly be the 11th hour because, there's been a contract. It'll be awarded in 2 weeks. So I think if we were wait 2 more weeks, it would be probably the prudent thing to do because otherwise the taxpayers are going to get harnessed with a $450,000 plus $150,000 tax bill. So that's just my thoughts on it.
Okay, so just for clarity, if this motion is passed, then we'll be awarding the contract, and if it's defeated, is there any change in process, or we can just bring it back at the next meeting?
I think it could be brought back as reconsideration, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Easiest done by yourself.
Okay, I just want to make sure that if it does get defeated, we haven't delayed the process any further. Okay, so.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Councillor Solda.
When the other councillors were talking about this particular building being a hazard, there's many buildings that are a hazard in this community that need to be remediated. And, so 2 weeks waiting is not going to hurt because we have other issues too. So I will be voting against this motion for 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will call the question on the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Solda?
Opposed.
You can't see, but it was a tie vote, so you're the deciding. Okay, so the motion is defeated, and for clarity, we will bring it back at the next council meeting in 2 weeks.
Madam Mayor, someone may wish to make a motion that it be brought back for reconsideration in 2 weeks.
Yep. I will make that motion that we bring this back for reconsideration in 2 weeks. Is there a seconder? Okay. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so moving on to item 4 from the Economic Development Manager, a request for resolution in support of the Regional Food Hub.
Council, an exciting opportunity to become a regional food innovation and processing hub was brought to our attention by the agricultural support workers of the Regional District's Agricultural Development Committee at a meeting in mid-June. And the Ministry of Agriculture is doing a two-stage competition to choose regional food hub sites around the province and awarding up to $750,000 for equipment and training. Our response to the first stage was due and submitted on Friday, July 5th. And it, for a variety of reasons, the city became the proponent. We'd like a council resolution in support of the project. It was allowed for in the RFQ. The circumstances are these. The Port Authority has offered matching funds to bring the former port fish plant up to current seafood processing standards. And a company called Canadian Seafood Processing, which is the parent company for Effingham Oysters, has secured financing to do that, but only needs 4,000 of the 12,000 square feet in the building. And both the Port Authority and Effingham Oysters are open to the idea of having a regional food hub or additional processing put in place. So our hope and intent is that we would put in coolers, freezers, processing equipment for fruit and vegetable and possibly meat in the remainder of the building through this initiative. If we were successful in the first phase and allowed to go on in the second, and then actually win designation as a regional food hub at that point. So we have North Island College, New Charlotte Seafood Limited Partnership, and Cascadia Seaweed are partnering with the Port Authority, Canadian Seafood Processing, and the city on the project, and we're looking for a resolution.
Thank you. Are there questions from council? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Where is this facility located, Mr. Deacon?
It's the old port fish plant down by Tai Landing.
Oh, okay.
So it's at the head of Fisherman's Harbor. There is both an ice plant, which is a tall structure right beside the water, and then the old port fish plant is just back of that. So it's between Tai Landing and Canadian Maritime Engineering.
Thank you.
Great.
The plant has not been used since 2011. And fortunately, it's in much better shape than Arrowview. But the Port Authority saw fit to offer this incentive to try and get it brought up to current standards and get it utilized and producing for the community.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Poon?
I think this is a great initiative, and I think we should support it. It'll be good for employment opportunities in the city, and it won't cost us anything, so I think it's good.
That's the key. Any other comments from council? I'll just say that I think this is very exciting, and this is an industry in our community that has a lot of room for growth, and I know it's one you've been working very hard on, so excited to see where this goes. Councillor Paulson, would you like to read the motion?
Oh, I'd love to. I'd like to that the report dated July 8th, 2019 from the Economic Development Manager be received.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Carried.
And that Council for the City of Port Alberni authorize the response to the Regional Food Innovation and Processing Hubs, RFQ, and support the project category of a full-scale food processing and innovation center.
Is there? Okay, any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. And item 6 from the manager of planning, we have a development variance permit.
Hello. Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I'll just wait for a quick moment for presentation to be pulled up. Okay, perfect. So before you for consideration today is the development variance permit for 3510 12th Avenue. Oops, I always do this. There we go. So just the background, the applicant is seeking relief from the front yard setback to vary the front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 5.4 meters. This would facilitate construction of a front yard porch on a residential property. The property is currently zoned R2, 1 and 2 family, and the principal building was built in the 1940s, and so they're just looking to kind of improve it with this additional front yard porch. This is, again, just a location of the property, close to North Park Drive and along 12th Avenue there. And here's just the site plan to kind of review it again. You can see the new deck on the east side of the property there that's proposed. In terms of the status of the application, APC endorsed the application back in May 23rd. June 24th, this came before you with APC's recommendation. On June 28th, we set out public notice to adjacent properties with a 75-meter radius. No comments were received by the planning department, so hopefully everyone's in support of it in the neighborhood there. And today, you're receiving it for final consideration. So, based on what I previously discussed with you, I think it's a fair application. The variance is supported by the planning department and by the APC. I think it'll be an attractive addition to the house, and it's worth supporting. So.
Thank you very much. Councillor Haggard, would you read that first motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the report dated July 3rd, 2019 from the Manager of Planning regarding proposed development variance permit number 93 be received and council proceed with consideration of the development variance permit at 3510 12th Avenue.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Any comments or questions on this at this point? Seeing none, all in favor? Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Thank you. And moving on, introductory remarks from the chair. Input received from the public and applicant and comments by staff and council will form part of the record of input into the development variance application. That's all? Great. Okay, we have had the background information from the manager of planning. Is there any correspondence on this, City Clerk? None. And any late correspondence? None. Any presentation by the applicant? Seeing none. Any input from the public? None. And are there any questions from council? Okay. Seeing none. Councillor Washington, would you like to read this motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move that the development variance permit number 93 to vary the zoning bylaw regulation to allow construction of a new porch at 3541 10th Avenue be authorized by City Council on July 8th, 2019.
Great. Is there a seconder? Second. Great. And any further questions or comments? All in favor? Carried. Okay. And back to the manager of planning. Observations from Grantonville Island and Lonsdale Key. Very excited to see this.
Great. I'm excited to share it with you. So I'll just give you a bit of the backgrounder here. So back in March, I think we were having some discussions about some patio spaces down at the Harbor Key, and I happened to be over in Vancouver one weekend, and being my nerdy urban planning self, I was just out there taking notes and taking photos, and decided to share it with the CAO and just, give him some inspiration based on my planning lens. And I guess he was inspired and asked me to share that with you. So here I am now few months later with a bit of a presentation just to highlight some things specifically around public space and placemaking, land use and development, and transportation. And just looking at Granville Island, Lonsdale Key, and Harbour Key, I think there's a lot of similarities between those three locations, and a lot that we can learn from them, maybe things that they could learn from us, and just things to kind of look to them for inspiration as we continue to grow as a community. So hopefully that can inspire you to think long-term and strategically about this this great little gem in the community. So just for those of you who don't know, Granville Island, just a bit of background on the history here. So it was originally actually 2 small sandbars that was inhabited by a small village of First Nations people. Around the 1870s, a sawmill and logging roads were established there. Over time, it kind of became more filled in with mud and walls around the area, kind of expanding it outwards. So more industrial activity located there, including factories, mills, and other uses. However, around the Second World War up until the 1970s, there was a lot of decline, economic restructuring, and kind of dilapidation happening on site on Granville Island. So revitalization was led by CMHC in the 1970s with a focus on really making it a people place and attracting people to the area and doing something new and innovative with it. So what they did is they added commercial and residential uses, primarily revitalizing and restoring dilapidated industrial buildings, making it a destination for both day and night. And the intent was never really to erase that industrial past, though, but to kind of celebrate it and incorporate it with new uses. So the result of that was really this really interesting revitalization project that resulted in Granville Island as we know it today. And now it welcomes over 12 million visitors a year, employs over 3,000 people, and apparently it's the second most visited site in Canada. I don't know what number 1 is, but maybe the Harbour Key one day. Who knows? So, yeah. Looking over to Lower Lonsdale and Lonsdale Key, again, very similar history here. So, originally home to the Squamish people, the Squamish Nation built permanent villages in the area along the waterfront there. Non-Indigenous settlement began very similar to Granville Island in the 1860s. Commercial and neighborhood areas were established and serviced by a streetcar for a period of time. Not a lot of people know that, so that's kind of an interesting little fact. Lots of industrial activity, though, along the waterfront there and the North Shore. And again, similarly, it started to decline as well. And post-industrial transition really began around the 70s and the 80s. 1977 is when the actual TransLink Seabus terminal was created, and that really created a nice connection between the North Shore and downtown Vancouver, but as well as other areas of the North Shore and West Vancouver as well, kind of becoming that transportation hub. The Lonsdale Key was added with the market in the for Expo 86 to make it kind of this tourist attraction, as lots was going on in Vancouver at the time. And still we see the area is going through a lot of waterfront renewal processes right now. The old shipyards are kind of being redeveloped into public spaces, condominiums, and other retail outlets. So if you go there, you'll see there's lots of construction kind of going on, but lots of inspiring vision for that location of the community. So just to kind of get into the comparison, though, so I'll just highlight a couple things with some notes and then show you some images to kind of illustrate those points. So again, the post-industrial transition, both in Granville Island and Lonsdale and Lower Lonsdale Key, really was initiated with this different economic conditions that were changing. The industrial use is kind of becoming outdated and no longer in use as much. And so the two communities, embraced what new industry kind of looked like, changing the uses of the space, but still continuing to have that element of industrial past there, not completely erasing it, finding ways to make sure that it was preserved and maintained and integrated with the new uses. And this leads into the next point. So mixed use, they're both really great mixed use spaces. And I think what works really well about them is that it's a lot of different things happening in really close proximity to one another, which is not something you always see in the way we plan things. We often put different uses in different locations and keep them far apart. And I think what works well about the vibrancy of these places is that they're all close together and you have a lot of different things happening at once. So you have non-traditional retail, manufacturing and production, educational spaces, event spaces, and it brings all these different types of people to the spaces. It really creates that activity throughout the day, which is kind of nice, so that continued energy and activity. Urban renewal and densification. So it's not just these areas that were renewed, but it was also the surrounding areas as well. So intensified land uses really became symbiotic with that space. So the streets around it and the neighborhoods around it also went through some renewal as well. And again, that redevelopment is still happening. So it's not just static, even though they're great spaces, they continue to reflect on themselves and grow and become something new as the times change and new people move in and new tourists come by. So yeah. Just to illustrate some of those points there, you can see kind of on the top left is, I think from 86 actually, a space that was part of Emily Carr, and then on the right, then that's it with Emily Carr, and now the future. It's the same building, but it continues to just be repurposed. It's not tearing it down and putting something brand new in. It's about keeping that industrial feel because that's what's unique about it, and modernizing it as things continue to change over time. So that industrial legacy doesn't get eroded, it gets celebrated and cherished through the buildings that are preserved. In terms of mixed use, this is just looking over a map of Lower Lonsdale and Lonsdale Quay. So you can see really a lot of different industrial, transportation, residential, commercial activities. And again, just to highlight that industrial is still happening there. So if you look at number 3 and number 9, those are still prominent industrial sites. So the waterfront continues to be an active working waterfront, which adds to that vibrancy. You have all these different uses that bring different people there and creates this really interesting natural energy, which is really cool. And similar if you look over to Granville Island as well. It's about having those different uses working together, not against each other, and bringing them together in a way that works. Maybe having little corridors for each of them or little nodes for each of them, but having them work symbiotically in one whole space. And again, that's just to kind of illustrate that. So you have market, industrial, restaurants, community centers, theaters, housing, all sorts of things. So really exciting. And again, they continue to get redeveloped. So this is the Polygon gallery that's being proposed for the North Shore there, right in Lower Lonsdale. You can see just, it's a really big new development happening in that space that's going to bring tons of people there and create lots of improvements in the area in terms of placemaking and pedestrian improvements and stuff. Again, you can see how the area's grown up around Lower Lonsdale there. Lots of higher density, medium density, different types of development. And this is over on Granville Island, just to switch back to that. So this was a parking lot essentially, probably up until last fall. And then just recently, I'm not sure if this is a permanent or a temporary structure, but a new restaurant that was built in that space with new seating. The lighting kind of creates a nice definition to the space, and it's a good, it illustrates really well how something like paint can help define a space as well. Something as simple as paint can really help create definition in a space. So kind of a nice reuse of a parking lot. So in terms of transportation, just some things to highlight. So these are all kind of multimodal locations, both the North Shore and in Vancouver. They're hubs of transportation. Public transit, private vehicles are welcome, walking, cycling, boats, kayaks, foot traffic ferries. And it's this diversity of modes, again, that helps bring that diversity of people. So that's kind of, I think, a really interesting central point of those places. When you think about the actual design of them, the shared street space design technique is something where basically there's not a lot of separation on Granville Island between basically vehicles and pedestrians, and that kind of slows everybody down, keeps everybody aware of each other. It helps pedestrians kind of maintain the hierarchy, I guess, in a way you could say it. So that's kind of an interesting design technique that they've embraced on Granville Island. And part of why they were able to do that was because they were under federal jurisdiction. So something that might be harder for a municipality to replicate, but something worth thinking about. They're both connected to the ocean. So they really embrace that in terms of transportation and marine industry and businesses, but also in terms of the actual transportation that's connected to them as well. And likewise, they're connected, all three of them are connected to rail. The rail is kind of, again, no longer utilized in those spaces. I think it's probably the next frontier in terms of where they'll have to go in terms of revitalizing lands. Just to illustrate the multimodal point, all sorts of types of transportation there between Lonsdale Quay and Granville Island. See the terminal there, really well designed for getting cyclists in and out of it as well, which is a nice feature. Shared spaces, so this just kind of shows you there where there's not really a lot of separation between the modes and how that kind of works. So in terms of public space and placemaking, really these are places for people, and that's the intent of their design, and that's in kind of the leading feature that's led their redevelopment over time. So the plazas, the streets, the paths, the waterfront, it's really about reclaiming it for people first and foremost. Having that people-centric design leads everything in terms of the way it's created, the seating is arranged, the way wayfinding's created, the way the streets interact with the people, the way the buildings interact with each other. It's all about focusing kind of on the people first and foremost. And so some specific design techniques that I just kind of observed from the area. Keeping things bright and colorful is always fun. Really creates a unique environment for people, that, especially in it's gray and dreary. It's nice to have bright spaces. They're similar but not the same aesthetic, so a lot of the buildings look similar but not the exact same. You don't want a completely homogeneous space. Focusing on social spaces, so through seating primarily, like really just load it up with seating, because the more seating you have, the more people will linger and sit there and talk to each other and enjoy that space. It's really a way of creating that inviting environment for people. Incorporating art in all areas of the space, so whether that's in the way the buildings are painted, or whether that's having art installations or painting different things. It's really a great tool of helping a place become a place. Lighting can be a feature used to help define space in public spaces. Facilitating connections in a space is a really important design technique. And again, branded identity. I think this is really important, where you actually have an identity that you focus on through placemaking, and then that place becomes known as a place. It maybe sounds weirdly high level, but if you make a place, people will think about it as a place, and then they'll go there and spend time in that place. So it's kind of this continuous evolution, I suppose. So just some examples of public art here. On the top, they painted some old industrial, or some currently used actually industrial cement. I'm not sure what the technical term is, but some cement things with some great art. Cement things. Then you can see down over in the North Shore there, they've got a nice kind of painted walkway there and sidewalk. And similarly, they've got a really nice fountain there as well over in the North Shore looking to downtown Vancouver. So something kind of similar to what we have. Public art here. This is just over on Granville Island. They've taken this parking stall and they've really embraced it as this, this kind of vibrant place that makes it unique. So having all these nice art pieces there is, it's something pretty straightforward to do, but it can really impact people when they arrive and leave that place. And then again, speaking to that identity, so you see Granville Island, they really embrace signage, and I think a lot of people, when they think of Granville Island, they think of those, the public market sign or the Granville Island sign, and it all kind of contributes to that feeling and that identity where people want to go and take pictures and be part of. And similar with the Lonsdale Quay as well. They've got the big Q up in the sky and a nice sign there, so it all kind of creates that association with a space that people remember. And this boat kind of creating inviting spaces, seating. So everywhere you go in Granville Island, there's tons of seating and lots of different types of seating. I think that's important too. Small tables, big tables, tables that face each other, tables that face away, things with awnings, things without awnings. So you kind of are trying to meet the diversity of needs, again, through your approach to seating. And then there's Lonsdale Quay there with their nice seats along the walkway there in the pier. And this is just like another example of how seats can be used to kind of create a little ad hoc public space, which is nice, and bright, vibrant building colors. So, yeah. So then when you think about Harbour Quay, I think, this is really a one-of-a-kind destination. When you think of Vancouver Island, there's not another one of them on Vancouver Island. I don't think there's anywhere in Victoria, Nanaimo, Campbell River. There's piers, but there's nothing like the Harbor Quay. And so it's a really, I think, important and unique spot for us to think about. We already have all the key elements, I think, of what I've talked about today, but there's probably still opportunity for us to learn and grow and improve upon that. And, I think any future improvements would probably require an interdepartmental approach, because it's not just planning, it's Parks and Rec, it's transportation, it's engineering, it's all those types of things. And I think it as well involving stakeholders and the public and partnering with First Nations are important elements of doing that really well. So yeah, these are, this is just really quick in the middle, and I was like, here's some random ideas if I had to take things out of what I was talking about there in terms of where you could actually implement some of those things, right? So public markets and public spaces, and a kayak, where could you put a kayak launch? Or looking at how future development in and around the area is going to create that symbiotic relationship, and opportunities for improving footpaths and seating and things like that. So these are just my ideas. I don't think it's the end all be all, but just things that I kind of quickly thought of. So yeah, I was happy to share that and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions? Councillor Paulson.
Actually, it's interesting. Our Harbor Quay, actually, the architects that were employed there actually were the same architects that worked on Granville Island. And Granville Island, believe it or not, was basically the same color as Harbor Quay is today. And what I was really impressed with is what they've done is it's evolved with regards to, one of your slides said bright and colorful. And it is surprising what a coat of paint can do. And I think our quay is overdue for that. The other thing that I've always thought was key to those two developments is they are anchored by accommodation, by hotels. And they both have hotels. And I don't know where a hotel or accommodation could go in the Harbor Quay area, but I think it would be a great addition because it gives you a built-in clientele. And I looked at the one picture of the fountain there. I think that was on the North Shore. But our fountain needs a little bit of refurbishing, maybe some color, and I love the artwork. Babe Gunn did the salmon sculptures, but it could have a little refresher too. And we'll talk about the tower later, the clock tower.
Councillor Poon.
I really like your presentation. I think it was great. Really, I've been to all those places that you mentioned, and every time I go there, I see, wow, Port Alberni could be just like this. I would love to see us copy some of those ideas. And on my recent trip to Quebec City, I also learned a lot about how pedestrianized streets can work, and I really like the idea of pedestrianizing more of those spaces.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Councillor Haggard.
Put me in line, Madam Mayor.
Sure. Councillor Haggard and then Councillor Solda.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think your presentation is very timely because we're trying to finish up our strategic plan and we want to develop a long-term vision for Harbor Quay, so you've given us some great ideas and information.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
Madam Mayor, I love the planner's presentation. I've always believed that that particular space, the quay, was should have been like a Granville Island. I spent a lot of time at Granville Island when I lived in Vancouver, but I would like to see us. Those buildings on the quay are not permanent buildings. They were never permanent buildings. And at one time in discussions, we talked about how they needed to be replaced, but we never ever did that. And I think there's so much potential in that area that we haven't even touched yet.
Yep, absolutely agree. Any other comments? Okay. Thank you so much for the presentation. I'll just echo what everyone else has already said. It's very exciting. I mean, there's so many similarities already, but I think there's so much more potential. So appreciate you bringing it forward. And I think that will definitely, it's great timing for working on our strategic plan in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on from our acting city clerk, we have the public hearing minutes from June 24th. Councillor Poon, would you like to move for seat?
Did we receive the other one?
Oh, the report. Okay, moving
Yeah.
back. Would you like to move receipt of the
Sure.
report from the planner?
I'll move that the report from the manager of planning dated July 3rd, 2019 be received.
Okay, is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Councillor Solda?
I in favor.
Carried. And would you like to do the next one also?
Sure. I'll move that the report of the public hearing held June 24th, 2019 regarding bylaw number 4989 be received.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the report from the public hearing? Comments? Seeing none. All in favor? Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Carried. And on to item G, bylaws. Number 1 from the manager of planning, we have the Advisory Planning Commission minutes. I think the manager of planning will come up to speak to this specific application. Let's first move receipt of the report. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the summary report of the June 27th, 2019 meeting of the Advisory Planning Commission be received and all recommendations accepted.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we will turn it over to the planner.
Hi. So before you for consideration is 4202 and 4238 8th Avenue, a zoning map and text amendment. The applicant would like to rezone the properties from RM1 low density multifamily residential zone to RM3 high density multifamily residential zone. And on top of that, they'd like a site specific text amendment to increase the maximum number of stories permitted to 5 and to increase the maximum building height to 18 meters. The purpose of this is that they're seeking to redevelop the 2 properties into multifamily condominiums. So just to kind of orientate you to the properties there, kind of central Port Alberni, just to the west of 8th Avenue and to the south of Roger Street there. So the 2 properties are designated multifamily residential already in the OCP, so no OCP amendment will be required. And they're zoned RM1 low density multifamily residential. They're located within a development permit area, so a development permit will be required before any building permit could be issued. Again, just to kind of coordinate around the form, massing, and kind of physical appearance of the building. The existing buildings are from 1977, and there's increasing concerns about maintenance with the building and site works as well. So the existing building is Woodland Village, which consists of 7 2-story buildings with a total of 38 units. And the proposed new development would include 4 5-story buildings with a mix of underground and surface parking and a total of 150 units. And this just kind of gives you a visual there from the northwest corner of the properties, what currently exists on site, northeast corner, just taking you around the properties here, southwest corner of the properties, and the southeast corner of the properties as well. And this is just a proposed rendering of what the building could look like, not an actual proposed for the purpose of a development permit, but just based on kind of what they're thinking from the northeast perspective. So again, you see that 5-story new development, nice new landscaping and things like that would, again, all of that would get coordinated and reviewed through the development permit process. Just some more proposed renderings there to give an illustration of what it could look like. So in terms of the surrounding neighborhood, it's a pretty mixed area with institutional, multifamily, commercial, industrial, parks and open space, so a little bit of everything in the area. There's close proximity to some community amenities, main commercial area in short distance nearby. Roger Creek walking trails are easily nearby in walking distance. There's the proximity of some main roads, and transit is readily available. One thing to note, the properties are located within the tsunami inundation zone, so they would be regulated by the floodplain bylaw. Just again, another aerial shot showing you where the existing buildings are, and kind of getting you a context there. The city works yard is just over to the west, and we've got Shaw Communications and some other multifamily developments there. In terms of zoning and permits, so the site meets most of the zoning requirements, though a variance permit based on what's proposed would be required for parking and probably open space as well. One thing that was just identified in the rendering was access from the alley, which is not something that we would permit. So it's just something to kind of be mindful of that we'd be taking care of through the development permit process. In terms of the floor area ratio, so they've proposed underground parking, so they would be subject to density bonusing of 0.1. I'll talk about FAR in just a second, just to make it sure everyone knows what that is. That came up at APC. So, and the 2 existing lots, we've asked that they would be consolidated into one parcel as part of the process. So just to be clear on what FAR and FSR is, it's really just the ratio of the building's total floor area to the size of the land that it's on. And this is just a mechanism we use in our zoning bylaw to kind of control that mass and scale of development. So when a developer proposes things that we consider attractive based on our policies, such as underground parking or accessibility or affordable housing, we offer a little bit greater FAR to the developers. So that's why they would get that 0.1 increase. And it's just a table kind of summarizing the required RM3 zoning and the proposed. Again, you see a small variance in the number of parking. That's why a variance would be required. Open space, it's quite close, but we might ask them for a variance there as well. In terms of infrastructure and services, there's water main running along 8th, sewer and drain pipes along the north and south side of the properties. Our maps weren't able to identify the connection points, so we'll need to investigate that a little bit further, but it should be easy to service the site with new and future development. BC Hydro has identified no issues, so they might need to do some reconfiguring to increase the circuit based on demand. And Canada Post has requested that the developer replace the existing kind of units with a lobby accessible lock and key community box. So in terms of our conclusion, the official community plan is supportive of this type of development, specifically within existing areas, doing redevelopment through infill. Densification and development in this area seems appropriate because of the proximity to other types of uses and nodes, commercials nearby, the arterial roads, transit, and the compatibility with the adjacent land uses. So for those reasons, we're supportive of the development, and I think it'll be a benefit to the area, increasing the total number of units in the community, and intensifying that area seems like an appropriate use of land. So there you go.
Thank you. Are there questions for the planner? Councillor Poon.
I'm just wondering if the building is currently occupied and if there are plans for relocating tenants, and if those, I guess particularly I'm interested in whether there are plans to assist more vulnerable tenants.
Yep, absolutely. So we've been talking with the property management team as well as the applicant themselves. My next slide included an extra slide there just to talk a little bit about this as well, because I think it's a good question. So in terms of protecting renters through rent eviction, the BC Residential Tenancy Act kind of outlines different ways to protect renters. So they'll be given 4 months notice plus 1 month free. It outlines different opportunities for disputing end of tenancy. They'll have the first right of refusal to reoccupy the building, and then there'll be compensation if the landlord doesn't follow those procedures that are outlined in the Tenancy Act. So they've been very proactive from my conversations with them and talking to tenants, and as new tenants kind of come in, having this conversation at the outset to let them know that this process is underway. And so I think they're pretty proactive on that front.
Okay, and my other, I guess, comment is that, so there's going to be 4 buildings that are 5 stories, and that's considered high density?
By the City of Port Alberni zoning bylaw, yeah, that's what we consider.
I would love to see in the future maybe a bit higher buildings, and that would maybe allow for more green space on the ground. Yeah, but I guess that's all we can hope for right now.
I just wanted to add to your question, in the APC minutes, it looks like where the current tenants would go was discussed, and there's a comment made here that it says the tenants have already been notified, not evicted, but notified, so they are giving them lots of notice, but specifically that they will have first right of refusal at less than market value once the new units are constructed, and that they do have some vacant spaces now, so it will allow for some rehousing of current tenants into empty units while the construction takes place in a phased approach. So I think that's really important to this situation, and it does sound like they're giving a lot of proactive thought to the existing tenants, so happy to hear that. Were there other comments? Councillor Haggard?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very thrilled to hear that there's more rental units coming onto the market in the near future. But there's such a shortage and such a need, so I'm very happy.
Absolutely. Other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. I'll just add that I think this is the first time that we've had an application for somebody who wants to tear down existing older residential and build new, higher density. So I think that really speaks to where the community is going and the strength that is happening in our development market right now. We've had, applications for new rental apartment buildings to be built on vacant land, but to see, somebody wanting to take their existing 37 units, tear them down and build 150 new, I think is exciting for our community. So very positive. Councillor Paulson, would you like to, hang on. First we have, we have a motion on the floor for the recommendations receive and all recommendations accepted. All in favor? Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Carried. And Councillor Paulson, would you like to read?
The zoning bylaw map amendment number 35, 4202 and 4238 8th Avenue, DeBeeld. Bylaw number 4993 be now introduced and read a first time.
Is there a seconder? Second. Any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, all in favor. Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Carried.
The zoning bylaw map amendment number 35, 4202 and 4238 8th Avenue, DeBeeld. Bylaw number 4993 be read a second time. Second,
all in favor? Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Carried.
In favor.
Thank you.
And that zoning bylaw map amendment number 35, 4202 and 4238 8th Avenue, DeBeeld. Bylaw number 4993 be advanced to a public hearing on August 12th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. in City Hall Council Chambers.
And all in favor? Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Carried. And if you would like to continue, Councillor Paulson.
Yes. I'd like to move that zoning text amendment number T22, site-specific uses, RM3 high-density multiple family residential, bylaw number 4994, be now introduced and read a first time.
Is there a seconder?
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any questions or comments on this one? Seeing none, all in favor. Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Carried.
That zoning text amendment number T22, site-specific uses, RM3 high-density multiple family residential, bylaw number 4994, be read a second time.
Second that, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Carried.
That zoning text amendment number T22, site-specific uses, RM3 high-density multiple family residential, bylaw number 4994 be advanced to a public hearing on August 12th, 2019 at 6:30 p.m. in City Hall Council Chambers.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Carried. Okay, thank you. Councillor Paulson, you can take a rest now. On to correspondence for action, and we have one item, which is a letter dated June 26th from the City of White Rock to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, canvassing communities for their support for resolution to UBCM, requesting that they work with the province in amending the community charter to allow all municipalities the authority to impose an annual vacancy tax. And as most of us are aware, currently only Vancouver has that ability through the Vancouver Charter. Are there any questions or comments on this one? Or any discussion? Seeing none, Councillor Haggard, would you like to read the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the copy of a letter dated June 26, 2019 from the City of White Rock to the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, UBCM, canvassing support of the resolution requesting UBCM work with the province and amending the community charter to allow municipalities the authority to oppose an annual vacancy tax be received, and Council for the City of Port Alberni provide support as requested.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Okay, any comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Carried. Okay, there are no proclamations and informational correspondence. City Clerk?
Just a couple of items, Madam Mayor. City of Richmond provides a letter requesting council support their resolutions at the UBCM convention in September. And the Guru Nanak Sikh Society invites council to attend the 2019 Punjabi cultural event taking place September 21st, 2019 at Echo Centre.
Thank you. Are there any items that councillors would like to speak to? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Washington, would you like to move receipt?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that the informational correspondence items numbered 1 through 2 be received and filed.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Madam Mayor.
Great, and we will send out the details for the second one to councillors so that we can all hope to attend. All in favor? Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Carried. And on to item L, council reports. And I see we, this time around, are successful in getting 2 council reports. So great work, Councillor Poon and I believe Councillor Corbeil. Shame to the rest of us.
I did send mine in, but I sent it to the wrong person.
I wrote mine earlier today, but it's not ready enough to read out here today. It's been a busy week.
I was scaring the tide out.
Well, that's a good reason to not do it. Are there any items that councillors would like to highlight? Councillor Washington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just would like to bring up that our first Our Town event for the summer, Moving and a Groovin', happens at Blair Park tomorrow night from 6 to 8 p.m. A 34-year tradition of free family fun with help of Parks, Recreation and Heritage and the local Kiwanis Club. And our major sponsor tomorrow night will be QP Local 118. And I'm sure Mr. Anderson will be there to take us, not the Mr. Anderson, but Drew Anderson will be there to take you on the hayride. So look forward to seeing everybody there tomorrow night from 6 till 8, Blair Park.
Great, thank you very much. Any other items to highlight? Okay, I just wanted to highlight that last Thursday, I had the opportunity in the morning to meet with to attend a meeting that the Port Authority was hosting with Bruce Ralston, the Minister of Jobs for the province. And it was a fantastic opportunity that the Port Authority put on. I know that Minister Ralston really spoke to that MP Gord Johns and MLA Scott Fraser were very instrumental in pushing him to come to town and hear about a couple of the projects that the port is working on, the transshipment hubs and the dry dock project specifically. So I just wanted to thank Minister Ralston for taking the time to come to town, tour some of our facilities and talk to some local businesses as well, and really just get an understanding of what those projects are. And then later in the afternoon, myself and some of our council had the opportunity to meet with him again. So I think it's always very valuable when we get the chance to speak with MPs and MLAs and ministers about the needs of our community, and anytime we can have these conversations and put the projects that we're working on the map for them, it's incredibly important. So, and looking forward to an opportunity to follow up soon. It's a very positive meeting. Are there any other questions or comments about reports? Okay, Councillor Poon, would you like to move receipt of the reports?
I'll move that council reports outlining recent meetings and events related to the city's business be received.
Second, Madam Mayor.
All in favor? Councillor Solda?
In favor.
Carried. And there's no new business today. And question period, an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions.
The press isn't even here.
No press, no members of the public today. This is the first time this has happened in a long time. Our 2 p.m. meetings have been pretty well populated for the last little while. Maybe not so much in the summer. Okay, well, seeing no questions, would somebody like to move adjournment?
So moved.
Is there a seconder? Second. All in favor? Counselor Solda?
In favor.
Carried. Thank you very much. Thanks for calling.